Good afternoon, everyone. We continue, but this is also the official opening of the ENVI meeting. We just had a slot together with the Court of Auditors together with ENVI, the Budget Control and Budget Committee. Those people are leaving the room now, I see. So that leaves us the ENVI people. And before we start with the first item, it's first the adoption of the agenda. I don't see any points being raised, so the agenda is adopted. Then on chair's announcements, it's the usual stuff on interpretation and electronic meeting and the web streaming. Only one point is that we only have Slovenian in passive mode this time. So it will be translated away from it. Then we have the coordinators' recommendations of the 25th of October. If there are no objections, they can be deemed adopted and approved. Seems to be fine with that as well. And then we have the report back on ongoing interinstitutional negotiations. Just saying that in between when we had the last ENVI meeting and this ENVI meeting, we had two trialogues. One on ETS aviation, which made progress, is then what you have to say. I was there, I would say progress is a big word, but we made progress. On the other one, we really made progress, and that is on the CO2 standards for cars, because a provisionary deal was struck just before we went into the Green Week, somewhere Thursday night. It was around 10 o'clock, as far as I can remember. But of course, that will have to come back to ENVI and then go to the plenary for official approval. But a provisionary deal has been struck with the Council, and we thank the Czechian presidency and the Commission very much for helping in striking that provisional deal. That brings me then to the ENVI agenda, where we go more into the contents. And the first item is we have here Commissioner Sinkevičius, and it's always a pleasure to have you in the ENVI meeting, and good afternoon. And we do have here a package of 3 laws, which was published 1.5 weeks before. And it's called the Zero Pollution Package, right? And it's consisting of 3 elements. And what we're going to do is that you are going to present the core elements of that. And then, of course, we will have a round of speakers to react to that. And then we have your reply to that. So, Commissioner, great to have you here. And you have the floor.
Thank you very much, dear Bas, honorable members, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, a very good afternoon to you all. And I'm also extremely happy to be here with you. Thank you, of course, for the invitation to present Zero Pollution Package to you, which Commission, as Bas pointed out, adopted less than 2 weeks ago on 26th of October, and which is a big step forward for citizens' health and for the environment. Our zero pollution ambition for 2050 is to reduce air, water, and soil pollution to levels which are no longer harmful to health and natural ecosystems that respect the boundaries with which our planet can cope, and thereby creating a toxic-free environment. And yes, there is still a long way to go to reach the 2050 target, but the 3 legislative proposals we just adopted, one to improve air quality, one to address fresh water quality, and one to modernize wastewater treatment, will take us further in the right direction with measurable targets for 2030 as a stepping stone to that 2050 ambition. And let me start with the first one, air quality. We have to acknowledge that this is an area where several decades of EU policies have already led to considerable improvements, and the trends are going in the right direction, and thanks to our joint efforts, and that's definitely positive. But it's not enough. Air pollution is still the #1 environmental threat to citizens' health and serious challenge for our economies. And the cost of present pollution levels is still far too high. The impacts are worse for the most vulnerable, notably children, the elderly, people with certain medical conditions, and economically disadvantaged. It's clear that we need to do more here and that we need to act with determination. What we propose will align EU air quality standards much more closely with the latest recommendations of the World Health Organization. When you add this to the improvements existing policies already, the expected result will be 70% fewer premature deaths from bad air quality in the next 10 years. At the same time, we are setting the EU on a trajectory to achieve zero pollution for air by 2050. This builds on the many co-benefits we get from decarbonization and the REPowerEU efforts that bring a huge acceleration towards cleaner energy production. But our proposal is not only about thresholds. We are also proposing to strengthen the rules for monitoring and modeling air quality and improve the framework for air quality plans. These new rules will be easier to enforce. We have revisited the way member states cooperate in tackling cross-border cases, and we are improving access to justice. We also want to give citizens a collective right to claim compensation when their health is affected as a result of laws not being enforced. This is our goal, not just for air, but for wastewater as well. At the same time, we are harmonizing the rules for competent authorities so that they can impose more dissuasive penalties against polluters who breach air quality measures. This will relieve the economy and the healthcare system. The cost burden from illness and lower productivity, the benefits are at least 7 times greater than the costs. Dear colleagues, and let me emphasize that Europeans really expect us to act. The recent Eurobarometer survey from 24th of October showed clearly that citizens, and in particular those living in cities near industrial plants or asthma sufferers, they are all worried about the effect of air pollution on health and the environment and ask us to act. Let me now turn to the proposal on fresh water. In the Oder River, on the Polish-German border this summer, we had a terrible insight into what can happen if you fail to protect a river from pollution in times of drought caused by climate change. And this dramatic lesson showed the urgent need to increase the resilience of our rivers, reducing pollution and boosting their biodiversity in the single best way to do that. Today, we still find pharmaceuticals, pesticides, PFAS in Europe's fresh waters at the levels that endangers the aquatic environment. We are addressing these problems by raising the standards for rivers, lakes and groundwaters as part of our drive towards zero pollution. Key changes include tackling the threats from new pollutants, bringing their concentrations down to safe levels, introducing an early warning mechanism for groundwater pollution, increasing availability and transparency of pollution data, and requiring member states to alert each other about other pollution events. And that way we have a chance to correct some of the mistakes that were made with the Oder River this summer, and that should not happen again nowhere in Europe. Member states will also be obliged to reduce pesticides in both ground and surface waters. That way our soils stay healthy, less treatment is needed for drinking water, and overall resilience will increase. As regards pharmaceuticals, let me be clear, we all need them for our own health, but their residues can be very unhealthy for nature. Without compromising access to affordable medication, the most harmful residues must be removed from our fresh water. Another clear source of micropollutants are personal care products, and the benefits of better monitoring and reducing pollution from these persistent micropollutants will be significant for water, soil, biodiversity, and also for human health. The third element of our zero pollution package is the revision of a law which has brought enormous benefits to EU citizens already. And I'm talking about the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive. Our goal is to bring the more than 30 years old directive in line with the ambitions of the European Green Deal. Given the current energy crisis, we need to mobilize all our resources. This wastewater treatment sector can both save energy and produce renewable energy, including green biogas, which would be a reliable substitute to a natural gas. Part of the proposal is an energy neutrality target for the sector to be reached by 2040. Combine this measure with the reinforcement of some of these standards has the potential to reduce the sector's greenhouse gas emissions by almost 50%, but also infrastructures need to adapt to climate change. Europe's rain regime has already changed. Heavy rains makes the treatment of wastewater more complex. In urban areas, our proposal puts the priority on nature-based solutions, greening the cities, for example, reduces the risk of floods. It also contributes to biodiversity and the well-being of city dwellers. We're also bringing in new rules to reduce emissions of micropollutants in line with the ones identified in the freshwater proposal. Two categories in particular, and namely harmful residues from pharmaceutical and personal care products that can be found in urban wastewater today pass through wastewater treatment plants and end up in fresh water. Under our proposal, procedures will be required to contribute to the cost of cleaning wastewater to avoid taxpayers having to pay that bill. This is a practical application of polluter pays principle. Drawing on the lessons of the pandemic, we also propose to ensure the systemic detection of health-relevant parameters in wastewater. This will help with antimicrobial resistance and also with COVID-19 and its variants. And these variants can already be identified in wastewater well before they actually spread widely through the population. And we propose clear rules to improve the transparency of the sector and ensure access to sanitation for all. Overall, the costs of this proposal are 2 times lower than its benefits. We made sure that our proposal is affordable for all. Finally, let me be clear that high standards for air and water quality are crucial, but on their own, they of course going to be never enough. They have to be effectively implemented on the ground. So all 3 proposals include suggestions as regards to improve enforcement, and the result should be more effective laws and lower administrative burden for member states. Honourable members, since the beginning of this mandate, the Commission has been making important progress with the rollout of the European Green Deal, and co-legislators are investing important resources to finalize the crucial Fit for 55 package, which will help us reaching our emission reductions goals by 2030 and climate neutrality by 2050. We are progressing in our green transition in spite of the challenges faced by the pandemic, the war, and the resulting energy and economic crisis, which have not reduced the relevance of the European Green Deal, but on the contrary, shown that our green agenda is actually the best way to making us more resilient and better prepared for similar crises. The 3 proposals I presented today, and which are now on the co-legislators' table, are key elements of our zero pollution ambition and thus of the environmental pillar of the European Green Deal. As such, they are crucial to increase the resilience of our health and of our environment. And this is why I'm calling on you today to treat them with the necessary priority so that we can proceed quickly with interinstitutional discussions and allow trilogue negotiations to be finalized before the end of the parliamentary term. We need to see tangible progress by 2024 under all Green Deal work strands: climate, energy, but also environment. And zero pollution is a crucial component here. For air pollution, we're listening to the voice of science, the people, and the WHO. For water standards, we are including new chemicals which were still unknown when the first standards were adopted. And for wastewater, we are updating legislation from a different era. The directive was adopted towards the end of the last century. So we owe these improvements to the European citizens. So once again, thank you very much for your attention. And of course, now I look forward to your comments and questions.
Thank you very much. And indeed, we will now have first a round of coordinators or their substitutes for the different political groups. I already also opened Catch the Eye for everyone that would like to also ask a question that will be then taken after the round of coordinators or their representatives. And I start with the representative of the EPP, and that is Pernille Weiss.
Thank you, Bas, and thank you, Commissioner Sinkevičius, for being with us again. It's always a pleasure to talk with you about what we can do for the environment, and especially this package has very great interest of me as being chair of the MEP Water. Therefore, my questions will relate to that part of the package. The current urban wastewater treatment directive has been criticized for being insufficient in regarding to addressing stormwater overflows. Especially the current directive does not include monitoring requirements for this issue. which will likely only become more serious as Europe experience more extreme weather in the future. Therefore, also because I know that you have actually addressed this question, I would though like to ask the Commissioner for further details about how Member States should fulfill obligations for monitoring the stormwater overflows, which are sometimes discharged without passing through treatment plants first. Also, do you hold plans to incentivize national and local authorities to build up capacities to treat wastewater and ensure that stormwater is actually led through these treatment plants instead of just discharged into the environment? Also, related to urban wastewater treatment directive, I would like to ask to the lack of compliance, which the Commission so far has been trying to promote through funding. Therefore, several member states still rely on EU funding to build relevant wastewater infrastructure rather than a sufficient system of water tariffs and public budgets. Therefore, could you please let us know in more details how you plan to address these shortcomings to promote sufficient investments by member states to manage nutrients, to treat micropollutants, and to reach energy neutrality without relying excessively on EU funds only? What role do you envision for water tariffs in respect to member states' different financing strategies? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And now we turn to the coordinator of S&D, Timo Wilken.
Thank you very much, Bas, and dear Commissioner, good to have you here. Thank you very much for taking the time. And I would start by thanking you for your hard work on this package. And I want to underline the strong support of my group for the intention. So we are fighting for zero emissions, so thank you very much for your proposal. I strongly believe that without EU legislation, we would breathe many more air pollutants, we would drink toxic substances, and it's due to the EU legislation that people are living healthier in the European Union. Technology evolves, and we now need to work on really banning all toxic substances with impacts on humans. And therefore, I want to reject cynical claims by other political groups who try to frame good environmental legislation as a burden. The opposite is true. The status quo is a burden for the people living in the European Union, a burden on the health of EU citizens. So my group is very happy to work on this package, and we want to strengthen the ambition in some aspects. And I would like to ask you two questions. The first one regarding the Ambient Air Quality Directive. You have chosen not to fully align the limit values in the directive with the WHO recommendations for human exposure. As far as I understand, your justification is that this would not be feasible in the short to middle term. But I would like to know, are these values compatible with the WHO recommendations as a whole in your eyes? And the second question is, again, I want to applaud the introduction of the polluter pays principle in the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive. This is something my group has requested for a very long time. Next to significant contribution to the additional costs, this should incentivize action at the source of pollution. This is good. But why did you not cover other industries by the extended producer responsibilities, such as biocides, pesticides producers, or the textile industry? And I would also like to know where you still see need for further regulatory action to reduce pollutants at the source. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. For Renew, now we have Niels Torvalds.
Thank you, Bas, and thank you, Commissioner, for being here with us today. Before coming to this meeting, I went through some of the maps you can find on the European Environmental Agency site about the different member states and how air quality feels and how water resources are looking in the different member states. And what you find by looking at the maps is that the situation in the different member states are very diverse. So it's probably fairly easy to breathe or drink water. In Finland, it's not so easy. You heard from my colleague Timo Wölken that when you do it in Germany, I don't know what they drink there, but mostly beer, but we don't know. That's Reinheitsgebot, so it should be fine, but if you have bad water, then it's not that fine. So my first challenge, and probably my only challenge in this issue, is that how did you get this through the subsidiarity test? Because in a way, you always say that EU does it better than the member states, and that's probably not really true in this case, which actually raises the issue of should you have another sort of legal basis for this case. At the same time, I'm sure that if you look at the majority of the member states, you still have very pure air, and you have a lot of premature death because of that. And the same goes for bad quality of fresh water. Therefore, we are going to help you as much as we can and get it through as fast as we can, because even if I doubt the subsidiarity clause you have, I think we should do a good job and get the Urban Waste Directive in the right direction. You already mentioned yourself how much we could actually earn by taking out all the things you can find in urban wastewater, and we probably could get all the phosphorus we would need for the next decades by taking it out from wastewater. So yes, I doubt some of the issues here, but we certainly are going to help you, even if we don't always like to help you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to myself, so I'll change my role here. First of all, really thank you very much for publishing this package 1.5 weeks ago, almost 2 weeks ago, because we know there is indeed a pressure, my colleague Timo Wölken already said it, by some political groups that are saying, we support the Green Deal, but then not really, is it? Because basically they say after Fit for 55, we're done. Whereas it was very clear that the Green Deal means that we are striving for an economy that is climate neutral, fully circular, but also a zero polluting economy by 2050. So if you support the Green Deal, it's also very clear that on zero pollution steps have to be taken. So we really are happy that the Commission has come through with these proposals, and of course, as others already said, we will help in also getting this through the legislative machinery, hopefully before the end of this term. However, we do have questions, of course, as well, because if you then look into the proposals, we still have the feeling that sometimes you have given in to some of the pressures. And certainly on air quality, and Timo Wölken already asked for that as well. First of all, the Parliament was very clear in its resolution, saying that you should align with the World Health Organization standards, and you're not doing that by 2030. So this means that still we are allowing more pollution to our citizens than what World Health Organization is recommending. But even beyond that, I have to say the wording for 2050 is even more puzzling, to be very honest, because you state as the main target that you want a zero pollution by 2050, but you do not define zero pollution. And if we then look at the review that you introduce, you have a lot of ingredients, and one of them will be the World Health Organization standards, but it's only one of them. So we cannot even be sure we are aligning by 2050 the World Health Organization standards. So I really would like to hear more concretely, when is Europe going to align with the World Health Organization standards? Because that's not clear from the proposal, to be very honest. Second question is on the water pollutants, very quickly. It's very good that PFAS has been added to the annex. However, you only add 24 of PFAS, whereas we know it's thousands of PFAS elements. So why these 24, and what is going to happen with the methodology that was promised before, that all the PFAS will be encompassed? Thank you very much for that. And now I'll change back to my role as a chair again. And I continue the list of coordinators, and there is no speaker for ID. So that means we now move to ECR, Alexander Vondra.
Thank you very much, Bas. So ECR certainly acknowledge that the poor air and the water quality is a serious issue, and we should stay committed to improve it. However, you know, as somebody who grew up in the command economy and remember the differences between the projection and the praxis, or just recently when we had this previous debate with the budget committee, I think we have to be careful about having harmony between what we are planning to do and what we are doing. And here, I guess it's not sufficient to set higher target alone. The ceiling for 2030 and mid-century have to be set at a level that is realistic, deliverable, and evidence-based. Any analysis relating to 2030 and beyond has many uncertainties associated with it. These, in turn, could have significant implications for the confidence one can have in any conclusions drawn from the analysis. Levels of economic and population growth, as well as the sector-specific developments, including technology and policy costs, will all affect the level of emission at the end of this decade. Such uncertainties can make the difference between a ceiling being achievable and unachievable. Where ceilings are set within 10% of the maximum technically feasible level of reduction, uncertainty around emission projections means it could turn out that it is not technically possible to meet the ceiling. In the Commission assessment, this seems the case for the fine particulate matter like PM2, PM5. Given the high number of infringement cases under the Ambient Air Quality Directives and the National Emission Ceiling Directive, with nearly all member states off track to meet existing 2030 targets, the legal and financial consequences of not meeting a ceiling make uncertainty an essential consideration for member states. Could thus Commissioner Sinkevičius outline the lessons drawn from the implementation problems that have repeatedly beset existing EU air quality legislation, and explain what the Commission has done in the latest air quality proposal to limit these analytical uncertainties and ensure that member states will be in a position to implement the final legislation in full? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we also do not have a speaker for the left. So that concludes the round of speakers on behalf of the coordinators. There is still a catch the eye, and we have taken all the names already. But we first now give the floor to the Commissioner so that he can respond, so that also the catch the eye can react again a bit to your replies as well. So, Mr. Commissioner, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And of course, thank you for your questions. And thank you very much, of course, for your support. It's absolutely extremely important. Now, first of all, as regards the storm water overflows and urban runoff, so the proposal addresses this problem, and member states are required to develop their integrated urban wastewater management plans and take action to reduce at the same time risk of flood and pollution emitted to the environment. And these plans need to be based on monitoring results and should clearly explain how pollution from stormwater overflows and urban runoffs will be reduced. What is the situation? Member states are incentivized to actually meet an indicative target that stormwater overflow represents no more than 1% of the annual collection urban wastewater load. And member states, and of course, first of all, it's cities, will also have to consider in priority the use of nature-based solutions. And here, this would not only be beneficial for urban wastewater management, but also for biodiversity, climate, and general human well-being. Now, as regards water pricing. So water pricing is 70%, first of all, is water tariffs, and then 30% is public budget. And what's very important that we introduce a new financing pillar, extended producer responsibility, which I will address later on in more detail as it was in questions. So our impact assessment showed very clearly that water tariffs are not expected to increase, depending, of course, how the extended producer responsibility going to work, how the industry is going to deal with it. But again, that might be reflected on a very, very minor increase of price of some products, but not on water bills. And now, of course, as regards the member states, and some of them trying and still trying to implement, member states can use number of funds as regards the improvement of urban wastewater, first of all, cohesion policy funds, but also other funds available. As regards the full alignment to WHO, and this is the question that two of the speakers asked. So I know, of course, very well, and Commission is aware of the European Parliament resolution which called on the Commission to align WHO air quality guidelines, and of course, our impact assessment that showed very clearly that reaching WHO interim targets, which WHO itself has included in the air quality guidelines of 2021, it's within the reach of 2030, but we're not able to fully align. And there are one of the things that, let's don't forget that we are very much dependent on other legislation. It's not only ambient air quality directive, but other legislation as well. And for example, Fit for 55 package is going to have immense role to play, or our energy transition and so on. So Commission has a review clause, and of course, depending on scientific progress, depending on energy transition and etc., after the review, we will see in which position we find ourselves. But I need to stress that, of course, reaching the already revised targets that we have proposed, it's not going to be a straightforward and easy walk. Member states will have to put in a significant efforts to do so. By contrast, our impact assessment did not show a viable pathway as yet to ensure full alignment. And this is why, of course, we as I mentioned, propose those regular reviews of the air quality standards to periodically reassess them in line with latest scientific evidence, in line with societal and, of course, technological development, and, of course, implementation of our legislation, which is going to play a crucial role. And I hope that certain decisions that are adopted by this House and by the Council, as regards, for example, combustion engine, won't be reversed. Now, as regards second part of the questions, as regards the pharmaceuticals and cosmetics as being micropollutants included, first of all, the impact assessment showed that this is the 92% of toxic load. So we basically addressing the biggest pollutant, and with others it would be more difficult to identify them, to treat. The investments, if there would be even possible, because in some we don't even have a technology yet, would be way too expensive. So that's why, given this information, we of course moved with the biggest micropollutants, with the biggest toxic load, and then of course in the future we might address the others as well. We are open to extended producers' responsibility to other sectors once we have, a solid information, because pesticides, they are roughly around 7% of input, and then if you look the input load to the wastewater treatment plants, it decreases to 2% of total toxic load. So it's really small numbers that we're talking here about. Now, as regards Niels Torvalds' question, and thank you very much for your support. So, first of all, of course, we looked at the subsidiarity principle very carefully in the impact assessment, and I have to say that this is not a new piece of legislation that we're putting on the table. It's a revision. So it's always been there enshrined. And as regards an equal situation in member states, it's great that in some member states we have a better situation than in others. But worse is to see that the situation in some is sliding down, and there is still a lot of work to do. As for example, concerning fine particulate matter, the pollutant with the highest documented health impacts, we see the highest concentration in parts of northern Italy and some Eastern European countries. And if we talk about PM10, then again we have Central and Eastern Europe, and it's primarily due to solid fuels as well as the older vehicle fleet and so on. So there is differences across member states, and some situation is better, in some it's definitely worse. If you look at Western Europe and our largest cities, of course, you see NO2 occur a lot, especially in the largest cities due to traffic. So there is definitely a European issue, and I hope that this proposal is tackling an European issue. And if we will be able to get those, let's say, with the worst numbers up, that's only going to be for the benefit of, first of all, citizens and people living in that region, and for the benefit of their health. As I already addressed air quality, if you may allow, Bas, I will straight away go into the 24 PFAS. First of all, those 24 are the most frequently found PFAS, including, of course, of very toxic ones. And the standard set on the latest scientific knowledge is very strict. And in drinking water, there is a standard for total PFAS. But this is subject to establishment by the 12th of January 2024 of technical guidance regarding those analytical methods for PFAS total and then some of PFAS. And while correct measuring of PFAS total by 2024 is feasible for drinking water, the method still needs, of course, further improvement and further work prior to use it for the groundwater and the surface water, which is much more contaminated. So consequently, the current methodology at this stage would not be reliable enough to distinguish between PFAS substances and other fluorinated substances in surface of groundwaters. We can look at a total PFAS again in the future revision when the ban on all but essential uses is in place, and work on methodology for, of course, measuring PFAS in surface and groundwater is concluded. And maybe a couple more words as regards zero pollution definition. I think definition was always there from the very beginning of the proposals. So zero pollution is defined as our aim to push down the pollution levels, that they are no longer harmful to people, health and to environment, and this was always enshrined in our ambition. This was always part. Of course, we have to take, as we deal with many issues, we have to take different, let's say, standards, different numbers, and etc. But the goal is very clear, what we want to reach by 2050. And as regards by when then air quality standards could be aligned with WHO levels, again, at this moment, as I said before, we did the impact assessment. It showed that by 2030 is not feasible. If we will be able to, for example, speed up and really advance, sensing the urgency, our energy transition, that might change. If we will be able to advance on pollution in our largest cities as regards the traffic, and then change to cleaner mobility, that might speed up. And during the revision, we will see a different results that might be feasible by 2030. But of course, for us proposing this, we have to bounce from the legislation which is on the table. So there is definitely room for improvement, but there still a lot will have to be done by member states, a lot of work. As regards the last question, as regards the implementation, which often fails, the ambient air quality directives, they already have proven that they can be very effective. They can be enforced in national courts and at the EU level too. But what we put on the table is more than just increased standards or higher ambition. Our proposal will further improve implementation and enforcement with, first of all, stronger provisions to justice, introducing provisions for collective damage redress, and clarifying penalties and public information so that people know the state of air quality and can demand action for clean air more effectively. And that, of course, a lot depends if citizens, they have enough information, because we have some member states, some cities who tend to have a decent results of monitoring, but then if you put the monitoring station in the park or on the busiest junction, that's a big difference in what you find in your results. Unfortunately, we still have these cases, but we're working very actively with those cities too to ensure that citizens have the correct information. And then, of course, I hope that they will be able to use the right as regards seeking justice of unimplemented legislation. As regards the additional funding, air quality is a priority. And we, of course, boosted the funds for clean air in the coming years. Over 126 billion euros will be available for clean air directly or indirectly in the current funding period. And this means that more than 17 billion per year can be used, for instance, for cleaner energy, sustainable transport, air quality monitoring. It's almost 3 times as much as what was available in the previous period. And you know, there is multiple purposes, multiple chances from member states to use the money. We have recovery and resilience facility, which can be used, and energy can be addressed as the first one, but also transportation cohesion, the Connecting Europe facility, rural development funding, Horizon Europe, and of course our LIFE program, as well as InvestEU program. So opportunities are there. I think very often member states have to really prioritize it, and of course it's very difficult when Minister of Finance, he looks at budget lines and then the calculations which are further as regards citizens' health and how air quality affects it. It does not reflect maybe the necessary budget lines, but I can reassure you that those costs which significantly outweigh the benefits, especially when we see that in some cases you can also successfully improve situation as regards the energy crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, also really for replying to all the questions in an elaborative manner. But there is now a catch the eye, so I'm sure there will be some follow-up here and there. First, we go to, for S&D, Helene Fritzon.
Thank you, Chair. I will continue in Swedish. And so först vill jag säga tack till vår...
First of all, I'd like to thank the Commissioner. I'm very pleased that there is a package for zero emissions. Air pollution is also a question of equality. We know that women and fetuses actually are affected worse by air pollution, so it's good that this package is going to bring about a halving of the effects. But I have to say I'm not completely happy listening to the answer you've just given on the WHO, and I do share the opposition that colleagues have raised here, because we know that strict limit values in line with the WHO would actually bring about benefits that outweigh the costs clearly. So I think there's more work that needs to be done. I'd also just like to mention something that's very Swedish in nature, and that's on wastewater treatment. Basically, it's good having high levels of limit values on emissions and limit values for phosphorus. But when it comes to nitrogen, the new demands here are going to cost a lot, and I don't see any environmental benefit if we look at the northern inland lakes or the northern parts of the Baltic, for example. So I think it is important that we do take that into consideration. How are we going to justify this when we see no environmental benefit? How does the Commission justify having stronger and stricter limits for nitrogen if it's not actually protecting against acidification and algal blooms? Because there are other methods that work much better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we go to Véronique Trilly-Lenoir.
Thank you, Chair. Je vais parler en français.
I'll speak French. Commissioner, thank you very much for your speech, for your presentation. It's obviously a question of health for citizens in Europe, and we might have thought that this hearing would take place in the presence of the Commissioner for Health. As an investment, as a budget investment, as you said, the benefits of combating air pollution is 7 times greater than its cost. I think that sort of argument should convince even the most reluctant member states. And then it's a human investment, as colleagues have said. Of the 33,000 deaths in Europe every year due to fine particle matter, cancer in particular caused by those particles, half of those lives could be saved if we followed the WHO criteria. Now, I wasn't entirely convinced, I must say, by your answer. You say that the Fit for 55 might be an obstacle to alignment on WHO criteria, but I see it as an opportunity. We will reduce emissions linked to fossil energy. We're going to ban the production of heat motors, of combustion motors in 2035. Isn't it a virtuous cycle, this Fit for 55? So I would also ask you about the alignment on WHO for the 2.5 particulate matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jutta Paulus.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for being here, Commissioner, and giving us so comprehensive and extensive answers. I would like to come on to a field which has not yet been touched so much, and I know that you're the least one to be responsible for what has happened, but I was really shocked that the one core piece of the Zero Pollution Action Plan, which is, of course, the revision of the REACH chemicals regulation, will now be delayed until 2023, so probably we will not be able to conclude it within our mandate. And I think this is really a missed opportunity, because there we could have really made a difference how we act on chemicals, how we act on pollution by grasping the problem at the root, at the core, not end of pipe, looking how much is in our water, how much is in our air, but saying we will only register and approve chemicals that are not detrimental to human and environmental health. So my question to you would be, what do you expect? How long will this delay perpetuate itself? Because, of course, it will take quite a while until a new parliament sets up with work again. And so instead of concluding within this mandate, as was promised in the Green Deal, will we have to wait until 2028 or even 2030? What would be your educated guess on that? And the second question, do you also see the opportunity that REACH could have actually brought forward also our climate ambition? Because if we would take up an additional feature in REACH, looking not only at toxicity, environmental adverse action and so forth, but also on energy input in production, climate effects of production. Don't you think that, given that Europe has such a large chemical industry, this would have been really worthwhile doing? Thank you.
Thank you very much. For Renew, we have still Frédéric Ries.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you, and thank you to the Commissioner for being here with us again. The legal limits for the main air pollutants that we breathe here in Europe date from 2008. Maybe you mentioned it yourself. It's a long time, and so we're impatient to have the work done on the recast of those rules. 300,000 early deaths in Europe. That shows how urgent it is. But I have to harp on about the limit values too. I'm afraid the Parliament gave its opinion 18 months ago, April last year, and we have been, after the discussions, we were very much in favour of aligning on the WHO limits on the main polluters. And listening to you in your original presentation and then your answers, you talk about the there being no pathway at the moment to full alignment on WHO values, but the and mentioned disparities among the member states. In the Commission communique, you talk about aligned more closely, and you, I think, said aligned much more. Now, the devil is in the detail, and the exact wording used here, you will understand that we can't be happy with this, the vagueness of the semantics. So, and that'll probably again be at the heart of the negotiations between us. Another question, if I've time, why treat ozone differently? You've a target value. Does that mean non-binding? WHO has it as binding. And then a remark. I agree with you entirely that the timing of our work, about the timing of your work in your press conference with Mr. Timmermans, you talked about 1 year for the landing. It's ambitious. It's not as good as for the single-use plastics, but still. But I think it's 1 year is necessary. We're continue to be too exposed. We have the polluted plastics bill, and it's 5 more times more than the. It's not enough for it being so out of line with the WHO limits.
Pernille Weiss.
That's just because it's so always so exciting to talk about environmental change and the climate challenge with you, Sinkevičius, especially in this committee. The rumor says about envy and Europe in general, and I hear that also echoing in your replies back to us, that we are very much fond of regulation. We see incentives as something that we articulate through targets, and there I also think that there were some interesting questions and answers back on that for reflection on a more political matter. What I would like to ask you, now giving the floor again, is in the EU climate law, there is an obligation let down in the text that the Commission should start up relevant climate partnerships to make it possible for us to push for more business and research innovation in the climate transition. And when I listen to what we're talking about here on the zero pollution package, we talk a lot about regulation and targets with impact assessments where we don't know exactly when and we will reach the target set by WHO. So we need to invest more in research, I say. And there the idea from the European Parliament is that the climate partnerships between researchers, industries, relevant industries, and relevant politicians needs to work better together. It actually needs to be created. So I would like to ask, when we put forward proposals in the zero pollution package plan to create climate partnerships, how will you from now on prepare to take on board these proposals so that we don't only regulate, but we also incentivize by inducing more innovation in this field? That would be very, very welcomed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and that concludes the Catch the Eye. So that means you have the concluding 5 minutes to go into the last questions.
Good. Thank you very much, and thank you for your question. So first of all, as regards the nitrogen and algae, so this proposal is not aimed at the drivers of eutrophication and nutrients, but at a range of other pollutants. The question is, however, of course, relevant for the existing Water Framework Directive, where the main time exemptions run out in 2027. And of course, nitrogen directive has to be implemented. So that's and member states have not taken the measures to improve the water quality on time. They may need to impose limits on new economic developments that impact on water quality. As regards the Fit for 55 and package, no, I completely said opposite, that it will have a positive effect, and we very much expect that to happen, actually. And hopefully, as I said, it will be finalized. The same as the proposal, for example, on banning combustion engine 2035, and hopefully there will be no flip-flops on that too, and we will steadily advance with the European Green Deal agenda, but also relevant industries agendas too. Now, as regards the REACH, first of all, probably I will use an opportunity to clarify a couple of issues and myths around the REACH revision. So we will propose a targeted revision of the legislation, which with the aim of securing European competitive advantages and innovation by promoting sustainable chemicals. First of all, simplifying and then streamlining the regulatory process, and then reducing the burden and protecting human health and the environment. And this revision is an extremely important piece of legislation that requires, of course, throughout preparation, consultation, in order to ensure that it's developed in a way that achieves higher protection for health and the environment from hazardous chemicals, but also supports EU competitiveness. And it's also the best remedy against increasing our dependence on chemicals produced in the rest of the world. We are finalizing our impact assessment, and we are finalizing our consultations with the stakeholders and working on solid input from the Regulatory Scrutiny Board. Once this file is ready, we will not hesitate to propose it and present it to the European Parliament and the Council. So the work is advancing. I think now it's extremely important to finalize all the steps. And then when it's ready, I hope we will have a green light to propose it. And hopefully, of course, we'll be able to do it earlier than what's in the Commission's working program, because at the end of the day, Commission's working program is also indicative document. As regards the air quality standards, again, European Parliament asked us to align with WHO standards subject to impact assessment. And impact assessment showed that we cannot do it by 2030. And this is what's stated. The first revision is going to happen in 2028. And as I said, depending on the technological, scientific progress and so on, depending on implementation of our legislation, we might have a completely different outcome. Now, as regards the other pieces of legislation, as I said, we are very much also, as regards the air quality, dependent on them and on their implementation. And that's why we had to refer to them and have the result, which is not a full alignment by 2030. Last thing on zero pollution and then of course collaboration and research and climate partnerships. There are a lot of existing already partnership with local and regional authorities, with researchers, and of course they are working even more closely together. As I've mentioned, there is a multiple opportunities for member states to also prioritize it as regards, for example, Horizon Europe funding to be used, and then of course invest additional resources into research and then enhance even deeper researching. But as I said in my concluding remarks, all this comes with very important part at the end of the day, implementation of the legislation, because we cannot be naive and say that only research or new targets will save us. At the end of the day, it's all about the implementation. And in some parts of Europe, we still have a lot to step up that implementation, and the means are definitely there. Once again, I thank you very much for your interest, for your questions. The work is definitely going to advance. I'm very thankful for your support and enthusiasm to advance that work. I always enjoy the trialogues with even further going ambition in finding that balance, which then, of course, we able to finalize and ensure that clean water, clean air is not a luxury in Europe, but something that each of our citizens can have it there at their home. Thank you.